Hey y'all, it's Maddie from the Itty Bitty Homestead Committee, and today we are going to go over how we do salt and egg tanning when it comes to our rabbit hides. So let's hop into that. So this is a rabbit skin fresh off the rabbit. I just pull them off like they're little sweaters. And in order to get these tanned appropriately, I cut them down the side so that they are correctly flat and the salt is able to get onto all parts of the hide. With that being said, this is also the point in time in which a lot of people also cut through the armholes so that they don't have that problem as they are tanning the pelt. You can either use a knife or shears. Most of the time I prefer shears. This rabbit was a little older, so the skin was very, very tough. But the other two pelts that I cut through for the day were pretty easy to cut through and were still very, very, very thin because of how young the rabbits were. Just remember, when you're working pelts, the younger the rabbit is, the easier it is to move through the fur. Now, this can be both good and bad because when you are stretching the fur later on, if the rabbit was a little too young, it's really easy to put holes into that fur. So make sure you're being very careful with some of the younger furs. Here's what my furs look like freshly cut. I do not wash my furs before I put the salt on them, but it's just plain salt, non-iodized. You can also use different forms of salt. This one's just my favorite. I got this entire tin for like 50 cents. And the good thing about salt is you can actually reuse it to tan as long as you're drying it out. You want to cover those pelts as completely as possible and make sure you're getting into those curved areas where the flesh meets the side of the fur. This is what the salt looks like after 24 hours. I normally let my rabbit hides sit for 48 to 72 depending, and I will reapply another layer of salt so that there is enough on there to continue to wick out that moisture. Here's my eldest helping me. She really likes moving the salt into the corners as we are tanning hides. This is her favorite part. She doesn't like breaking the hides because she says she isn't strong enough, but I am just tickled to death that she is happy enough to help with these kind of projects. She absolutely loves working with rabbit fur because of how soft it is, and I am just happy to teach her this kind of skill that isn't very popular anymore, because you never know when you're going to need it or if it will ever be useful. But anyway, after about 48 to 72 hours, I pull the hides out of the salt. This is kind of where they're at. They're very stiff, but they're not like breakable, if that makes sense. I'm going to scrape as much of that salt off as I can, and I'm going to separate out a single egg. I want the yolk. The egg whites I'll just use to make my breakfast. Then I'm going to take that yolk, just plop it right on the fur and start massaging it in. Some people, they like to do this when their furs are damp. I like to do it like this, and then I will take a damp towel and place it over the fur. Whichever way you want to do it, take a couple of rounds, see what you like best, figure out what method you want. But here you want to make sure you get every part of the skin while not getting it on the fur, and just massage it into all of those very small corners to appropriately move that fat around. And I am just going to let it sit like this for the next 48 hours under a damp towel before I fill my sink with some lukewarm water and push those furs down. Now, I do let the furs soak for a couple minutes to rehydrate slightly and become a little more bendable, and it also makes it easier to kind of work on breaking those hides. With that being said, I always do a pre-wash so you can see how dirty this water is, and I will dump that out before I start filling up the sink again and putting my favorite kind of body wash on the furs. You can use any kind of body wash, soap, that kind of thing. Avoid conditioner or two-in-ones because it leaves a weird kind of film over the skin, but a simple soap works really well, and you just want to massage that in really good to get the dirt out of the fur and kind of get rid of any weird smells. And then sometimes you kind of have to scrape the egg off on the other side, just a little bit of a warning, and then you're going to once again dip and rinse. But as you can see, I'm really working this fur to make sure I'm getting all the dirt out on all of that egg off. And when I am trying to wring out the water, I am squeezing, not twisting. Do not twist your furs to wring them out. It will cause the hair to slough off and you'll get little bald patches on that fur. The longer you leave the fur in the water, the easier it's going to be to mold and break, which is going to help you later on in this process when you are starting to make that fur more supple and breaking that skin down. Again, here I am squeezing, not twisting. And this part of the process normally takes me about 5 minutes to 10 minutes per hide. So it is a bit labor intensive, and you just kind of want to focus on getting all that egg yolk off and really starting to work that skin. Another thing you'll start seeing me do at this phase is I'm going to start stretching the skin. I want to work from the middle outwards, stretching in all directions. Be very careful on those edges that you don't rip them. But as you can see, as I'm stretching it, the hide is turning white. It's kind of hard to see in this phase because the fur is just wet, but I promise this is working and you can see it turning lighter. Another thing I'll do is I'll start rubbing it on things, and that's skin down that I rub it, and that kind of help breaks those corners, makes it more flexible. If you have a pelt like this that's a little harder to work with and a little more dried out, you can leave it a bit longer in your warm water to kind of just work it more. I know some pelts, they dry out a little more, and as you can see, I was not careful on that edge and I ripped it a little bit more. So definitely be careful on those edges. I will say that this hide, you can see better how it's turning white, especially on those corners, from that kind of muddled brown color. So again, you just want to work your pelts, and working the pelts takes the longest, but you can kind of rub it skin down on things and kind of like back and forth, and that really helps to break it. And I think I'm going to do it with this fur here because this one was really being a pain. You also see right here, I left a little egg on there and I was scraping it off. But again, you just want to really work these hides to make them more flexible and easier to work with. The more you work the hides and the more you break the skin, the easier it's going to be as they start drying to continue this process, because you don't just stop here. You work these hides from wet to damp to dry to get them nice and supple. After I'm done with the hides at the sink, I let them sit out for about 2 hours to kind of dry a bit. And again, I am going back and stretching that fur out and continuing to work it. This is the damp phase. As you can see, it's not sopping wet and it's getting a little harder to pull and get that white. So again, we want to use the correct amount of force without ripping things. And once again, you want to make sure you're getting those edges without ripping them. This is the worst place for me when it comes to stretching. I'm really bad about forgetting those corners and edges, and I kind of forget about them. So make sure you're breaking your edges as well. Once my skins are mostly broken down and mostly dry, I'm going to take my oil of choice and massage it into the skin so it's a bit more supple. Mink oil is a really great oil to use, but whatever you can find that is cheap and won't go rancid on the fur works totally well. So just massage that into the skin so that it helps with it being supple and easier to pull out and work with. Make sure you're not a dodo brain like me, and if you do have egg, make sure you scrape it off. Here is the point where the furs are completely dry. We are just fluffing up the skin, and if I have a harder pelt, I just hand it off to Danny so he can finish breaking it. And as you can see, he's pulling it, it's turning white, he's making it more supple. And again, you just want to work it and just make it soft and easy and pliable. And especially if you're working with Rex fur, your fur is going to be a little clumpy at first, and you need to go through and kind of rub it out and fluff it up because those hairs really hold on to the oils from that last bath. So again, just fluff your fur up and it'll be good to go. Something else I want to note here when it comes to salt and egg tanning is a reminder that this is not waterproof, and although it's cured, if you get it wet, it can be problematic. If you do want to waterproof your hides, I'm pretty sure you can only do that through smoking. So there is that option as well if egg and salt tanning isn't for you. But anyway, here are our 3 hides good to go, and you can use these for your projects. You can cut them down into squares and make blankets. Either way, they are super soft, super pliable, and just beautiful to look at. Salt and egg tanning isn't my favorite way of tanning, but it is a really great way that is cheap and effective for craft projects. But anyway, that's all I have for you. I just want to tell y'all, thank y'all so much for getting this far into the video, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.